Welcome to Blue Nile Tutorials. Today we look at a June 2015 exam question. Willow ones for our 2025-2026 exam preparation summary. Familiarize yourself with the exam structure, syllabus, and key areas for each paper. Focus on high-weighted topics like audit, financial reporting, and taxation. Create a study plan. Set clear goals and a realistic timeline. Allocate time for learning, revision, and mock exams. Prioritize weak areas while maintaining consistency. Practice past papers. Attempt ACA-approved past exam questions under timed conditions to understand exam patterns and improve time management. Master time management. Practice dividing time for planning, answering, and reviewing during the exam to ensure all questions are attempted. Use quality study materials. Rely on ACA-recommended resources, revision kits, and online courses for structured learning. Focus on exam techniques. Read questions. We are going to look at a question called Willow wands. This is question 1 from the June 2015 exam and is for 10 marks. This question covers ethics, more specifically the threats to objectivity. The scenario is very detailed, which is what you would expect from this style of question. Remember, when planning your answers in the exam, to remember to allocate 1.8 minutes for every mark. This question should take you no more than 18 minutes. To successfully complete this question, you will need to plan your answer taking care with the time allocated to each part of the question. Use the scenario where needed, and have clear and efficient communication. It may be worth pausing the video at this point and printing off the exam question. That way you can follow the scenario as we talk through it. Let's break down the requirements. The question is split into 2 parts. Part 1 asks you to identify and explain 5 ethical threats, which may affect the independence of Beeching Co.'s audit of Willow wands. It states that this 10-mark allocation is split equally between each part. Therefore, this part is for 5 marks. You should be planning to spend around 9 minutes on this. And for maximum marks, explain 5 threats identified from the scenario. Part 2 asks that for each threat, explain how it might be reduced to an acceptable level. This is again for 5 marks, and so 9 minutes should be allocated to this part. Presentation is key when answering this type of question. We can clearly see that both requirements are related to one another. It is therefore sensible to present your answer in a way that allows the marker to clearly understand your points, and for you to answer the question as quickly as possible. The best approach is to set your answer paper into 2 columns. You must clearly label each column and set up a heading for each, so the marker can see where they can allocate marks more easily. The headings could be ethical threat and how to reduce threat. Once the columns are set up and the scenario are absorbed, it is then important to clearly explain your points and leave spaces between each one so your page is not a sea of writing, which is more difficult to mark. For each ethical threat, you will be awarded half a mark if you identify the threat from the scenario. You will then be awarded the other half a mark if you state the type of threat to objectivity it relates to, and explain, in your own words, why it is a threat. Remember, it can relate to more than one threat, but do not list lots of threats as it looks like you're guessing. On the other side of the page, you will be awarded a whole mark for a sensible approach to reducing the threat mentioned. With the structure of our answer laid out, it is now time to run through the scenario and identify 5 threats. Do this by reading through the information and underline or highlight the area where you feel a threat is mentioned. I usually number these also so I can see how many I have. You can then write notes in the margin that will help jog your memory when you come back to write them up in your answer. The 5 threats identified to use in our answer are as follows. Number 1. The previous engagement partner, Bethan, has been suggested to undertake the role of independent review partner this year. 2. The previous engagement partner, Bethan, has been requested by Willow to assist them in attending audit committee meetings as an NED has left the company. 3. The total fees received equated to 16% of the firm's total fee income, and this year's fee could be greater. 4. Last year's audit has been paid in monthly installments, but there have been no payments for the last 3 months. And 5. The audit manager for the client has just announced that they are leaving to join Willow as the financial controller. Let us now explain these threats in more depth for part 1, along with the recommendation of how to reduce the threat to an acceptable level for part 2. The first threat suggested was that Bethan, who had previously been the engagement partner for 7 years, should this year conduct the independent partner review. This is a familiarity threat. She has been associated with the client for a long period of time, and it will possibly lack objectivity when forming conclusions. To reduce the threat, each should use another partner to conduct the independent partner review. Bethan should not be reviewing or making decisions on the audit of Willow for a minimum period of 2 years. The next threat is that Bethan has been requested by Willow to assist them in attending the audit committee meetings. This is a familiarity threat, but also a self-interest threat. Bethan's involvement with the client could be seen as assisting in management, and the firm lacking objectivity. To reduce the threat, Bethan should politely decline the request, explaining the reasons. The total fees received by Beach from Willow equated to 16% of total fee income. There is also an expectation that the fees this year will be bigger. This is a self-interest threat, and potentially an intimidation threat. With the fees rising and already above the recommended maximum of 15%, it is likely they may risk being in a position where they could behave unethically to retain the client business. The recommendation should be to review the fee income for Willow this year. If it is above 15%, they should consider not continuing the tax and other non-audit fee work to reduce the overall size of the client to them. If the fee income is above 15% for 2 years, they should also disclose this with those charged for governance. Last year's audit fee was paid in installments, but the last 3 months have not been paid. This is a self-interest and possible intimidation threat. Beach may act unethically to ensure they receive the payment. It could be withheld to threaten Beach into unethical behavior. They can reduce the threat by discussing the non-payment with Willow management. They should also set up a revised payment plan. If the problem continues, they should consider delaying further work until payment is received. The audit manager assigned to Willow has just announced they are leaving Beach to go and work for the client as a financial controller. This is a self-interest and familiarity threat. The audit manager will already be very familiar with the work carried out by the audit team, and may have already commenced some of the work before leaving, which will affect how independent they are. Performing an independent review of any work carried out already by the audit manager can reduce the threat. They should also change the audit plan so it is less familiar and retain professional skepticism. With the 5 threats now identified, explained, and presented clearly, the answer is now complete. Please remember, to be successful in this type of question, we need to plan the approach and ensure we have identified how long is needed for each part. Use headings to introduce your answers and space out your points, so it is clear for the marker where the marks can be allocated. Finally, if there is a scenario, use it. This information was given to you for a reason, and at F8 they are trying to see if you can apply your knowledge to a given scenario, and not just be able to remember the facts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you and good luck.